Okay, so hello and welcome to msdynamicsworld.com's Fall CRM Strategies webcast series. I'm Adam Berezin from msdynamicsworld.com, and I'm really happy to have all of you here with us today for this event. Today we have Gretchen Opferque, a CRM veteran and highly experienced project manager and business analyst who serves as the Director of Education at PowerObjects. In this role, Gretchen is responsible for consultant development as well as customer and community education. We invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today during Gretchen's presentation, and there are a couple of ways to do this. First, you can use the Q&A tab that you'll see in the webcast session here, and second, feel free to tweet your thoughts and questions. We're using the hashtag MSDWCRM to take questions. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Gretchen Opferque.
All right, thank you, Adam. Well, I think we're going to start out initially here with a poll to just kind of find out why you are attending this user adoption webinar. I just want to get a feel for where people are at and if they are planning implementation, or if they are in the middle of an implementation or towards the end or that kind of thing. So if you could just respond to the poll. Adam, are you seeing responses coming in?
I am seeing the responses.
Okay, maybe you could just kind of let us know where the responses are coming in, if it's currently dealing with user adoption issues, planning ahead to validate what we're doing. Are you seeing the percent responses, Adam?
The percentage, yep, the majority have stated that they're planning ahead so far.
All right. Okay. So we can close the poll and we will go on, and I'll just start by talking a little bit about the agenda. We are going to go through the different phases of a CRM implementation and talk about where user adoption starts to be built, where the foundation of user adoption is in each of those phases. So I know the audience that we have here is in varying industries and various size of organizations, and you're also probably in different phases of your project. But just by going through each of these, I think you will glean but I do want to do a poll to find out where you're at in the implementation process. So, Adam, if you could launch that poll on where you're at in the implementation process, just to find out where our audience is at, that would be great.
Sure.
So are you just getting started with your implementation? Are you in the middle of an implementation? Are you nearly finished? Or have you been using CRM for a while?
Seems like the majority have been using CRM for a while, Gretchen.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So even though I'll be going through the stages of the implementation process, again, I think you'll still glean some best practices and some things that you can do even if you've been using CRM for a while. And towards the end, we will be circling around on reinforcement and rescuing possible situations where user adoption is not going well, and that will also hopefully apply to people who have been using CRM for a while. So let's get started with the planning. Planning is definitely an area where user adoption, you can start thinking about user adoption. And what I'll be presenting today is really, it's really the ideal. So if you've already implemented CRM and the ship has sailed and you haven't done some of these things, that's okay. But some of these principles are excellent to apply. So depending on whether you have the luxury of thinking about these things when you're planning your implementation or not, or if you're currently struggling with user adoption, these principles will apply. So let's talk about some of the things that you want to do when you're planning a CRM implementation for successful user adoption. So the first one is getting buy-in from senior executives and managers. This is just the number one reason that CRM systems fail and that user adoption is low. Contrary to popular belief that you need to actually focus on the end users and what they want, you really need to focus on the executives and the business managers, the team leads and the department heads, to ensure that they are driving the organization towards using CRM. So to do that, you definitely want to plan out their participation in various events and how they are going to give a plug for CRM or how they are going to cast a vision for CRM at various team meetings or company-wide meetings. We want them to be a vocal participant in the use of CRM as an organization. We also want executives and team managers and team leads to project that the use of Microsoft Dynamics CRM is part of employment here, and that's where we're headed. That's where we're going, and if you basically, in a nutshell, if you don't want to be going in that direction, if you don't want to be using CRM, then it's time to look for another place. I know that's strongly worded, but we want them to kind of cast that vision of this is where we're heading, this is the direction we're going, do you want to be a part of that? So if you're the lone IT person, or if you are a person who's trying to drive the use of Microsoft Dynamics CRM from the side or from below, and you're not getting that buy-in, you have an uphill battle ahead of you. You're definitely set up for failure, because this is the number one reason for failure and lack of user adoption. In addition to just driving the direction and getting people on board, this is the number one way to overcome that sort of what's in it for me focus. Many users have a what's in it for me because they see the organization as about them and their contribution to the organization, but creating the feeling that you're a part of something bigger and there are a lot bigger issues than just your daily tasks. So get on board and let's go together in the direction that we're heading. So can't stress that enough, that the executive buy-in, the executive leadership and vision is key for user adoption. And of course you want to start that in the planning. The next thing in the planning phase you want to think about is, this is a little bit more of a lighter topic, but casting a vision for how CRM is going to be used in your organization. I like the idea of creating a pet name for your project or for your CRM. A lot of organizations do that. It creates kind of a face of the project, so you know, people can unite around that name. I'm all for having a you-rah-rah session where you get together with a broader group of potential users and build up their excitement, bring cupcakes. The main thing with that is just to be real. Don't over-promise what the system is going to do. Talk about the journey that you're facing and the phases of that journey and what the long-term vision is, but what the short-term quick wins are going to be that you're going to attain. I love the idea of using a theme and that goes along with that project name. So I worked with an organization that had a theme of cars. That was the name of their CRM system that they were developing. It stood for Customer Acquisition and Retention System. And that was the whole automobile theme that they used from the beginning of their project all the way through the end, and now even as they've been live for several years now. Different meetings kind of revolve around that automobile theme where, they can get their engine started, the race is on, you're on the right track. They even purchased these car-shaped stress balls when they went live, and they had NASCAR T-shirts for everyone, and at the kickoff meeting for the go-live, they waved the checkered flag and just had a whole bunch of you-rah-rah and communication around that theme. I even love how they named their support help desk after go-live the pit crew. So just taking that theme and taking that name along, it actually goes a long way in terms of building employee morale and excitement around your CRM system and your project. So Microsoft, they came up with a good name, Microsoft Dynamics CRM, but feel free to throw out that name and create your own name for your system. So the last thing in planning is thinking ahead to the rollout and support. So this is where a lot of organizations choke on user adoption, is when they get to the rollout and support, they don't have enough resources on the ground working with end users, and they haven't involved those people from the beginning of the project. So they're scrambling around to try to train up a base of people who will support the users. So that's something that you really want to think about if you have the luxury of planning those things. Some organizations are actually looking at what people's job roles are going to be before and after the new system is rolled out. Are people's job roles going to change, and do you even need to bring in a change manager to help with those things? In addition, for support, just talking about who's going to be the champion of this system. And if you're a large enough organization that one champion isn't enough, what kind of support system are you going to have? You're going to need people both on the business side and on the technical side to support the use of CRM. So just even thinking about the training and reinforcement, if you're working with a partner or if you're planning on doing train the trainer, who's going to conduct those periodic reinforcement trainings and really promote and increase the depth and the breadth of CRM in your organization. So those are things that, yes, it would be very luxurious to be able to incorporate those things into your planning to promote user adoption. Perhaps if you've already down the path or if you're already live, you can still be thinking about some of those things. So the next phase in the implementation that we want to talk about is design. How do you design a system for user adoption? Well, one easy solution seems to be, you just include the end users in the design process. And if you include them, then we'll design it the way they want and we'll get their buy-in. But I think we should flesh that out a little bit and talk about some of the realities of doing that. So just some of the basics of design. You're going to be designing a CRM system, first of all, from the top down. The leaders of your organization, the managers, they're sponsoring the project. It's their budget. Obviously, they need to get what they want out of CRM. So we want to look at, the executives' critical success factors for the project, the analytics they hope to get out. They better be getting some reports out of that CRM. They need to be seeing the ROI and the time saved, and just the ROI of combining disparate spreadsheets and systems into a single system. So that is just the basics of CRM, and hopefully you're getting that out of your system. Another one of the basics is modeling the organizational processes. So just making sure that you're taking either a single team's processes or multiple teams' cross-functional processes and designing Microsoft Dynamics CRM to support those processes across the board, improving communication and effectiveness. That's one of the main driving forces of implementing CRM, and hopefully you're getting that. Microsoft Dynamics CRM is a foundation for success, and you build on that the way that you design and implement it. So I think we all know that the software features alone aren't going to make a successful implementation. But let's talk about the bottom up. Let's talk about the end users. This is often one of the most neglected areas of the CRM implementation process. A lot of times we just assume that the fact that the end users are going to get Microsoft Outlook or the Outlook client, that's going to thrill them, and that they are going to immediately, connect with CRM because it's in a platform that they're used to working with. But I think that we need to take another angle with our user adoption and looking at how end users are really using the system. And I kind of call this a feet on the ground, realistic approach to implementation, where we want to take some time to look at the day-to-day tasks that end users are doing. So if we don't do that, when we roll out the CRM system, it's going to be a shock to the end users. And some users are going to really absorb that and move on, but some users are going to continue to come back and say, this doesn't match what I'm doing, and they're going to be complaining and fighting and making your life miserable because we didn't take the time in the beginning to take a look at how they do their jobs. So some suggestions for doing that are in the design process to make sure that you include some interviews on their day in the life. And if you have this luxury, I would recommend it, even if you've already implemented CRM, to sit down and watch the users, how they're using the system every day, because how they come to a meeting and describe what they do may be very different from what they actually do. Because they're experts at their own job, they're not experts at business analysis or describing and defining things, possibly. If they are, that's an exception. So see it for yourself, make sure that somebody is sitting down with the end users and looking at what they do and streamlining some of those daily tasks that they do. So do you include the end users in the design process? That's a really tough question. Even if you've already implemented and maybe you're doing some enhancement to the system, do you include those end users and ask them basically, what do you want? That really depends on the size of the company and also the personality of your users. I think one of the defining things that I look at is, do the end users have the ability to see the broader organizational processes and the broader organizational strategy? Or are they, do they find their own processes and their own daily tasks eclipsing in the design process? So we don't want end users to come to a design meeting or to come to an initial planning meeting just thinking about what they do daily and fighting for their own processes over the broader organizational good. So make those calls and define your design teams and your enhancement teams around whether users can actually handle that. And the last thing in the design is to keep it simple. So this is probably one of the more obvious ones that you've thought about, but in order for end users to easily adopt a system, it has to be easy to use. The screens have to have things on them that are clear, the order of the fields. Anything that's not being used should not be on the screen or on the left navigation. If you are a larger organization and you're planning an implementation or you're rolling out CRM, if you can pilot CRM with a group of users that has a more simple process defined than users that have more complex, you're going to get great benefit out of taking that low-hanging fruit and implementing them first, the easier teams first, and then rolling out to more complex teams. If you're just implementing with one team, you definitely want to look for those quick wins in your initial implementation and possibly push off big complexities to a later phase, because users are going to be able to absorb a very simple system, and then as they learn that, take on additional processes and technologies. Again, sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you're replacing a very complex system or a very complex group of processes, and so it is just what it is. It's very complex, but if you can keep it simple, that is awesome. So those are all of the things I'd recommend in the planning phase of an implementation and a design phase to enhance user adoption. So let's talk briefly about testing then. Testing is a great opportunity to really start building user adoption if you haven't done anything in the planning and design phases that we've described here. So testing is really where you start opening up the system and the design into a broader audience who's going to be taking a look at it. It starts to be where the reputation for the system is formed in your organization. So if testing is a frustrating thing for users, they are going to go back to their desk and talk about it in the lunchroom, at the water cooler, and all of those things. So you definitely want to be prepared that testing is an opportunity to set the expectations of what the system is going to be like. Therefore, when you roll out testing, you want to have one way that the system is, that they're going to use the system. So especially with Microsoft Dynamics CRM, it's a robust system. It has a huge amount of functionality, and there are a lot of ways to accomplish the same thing. But when you roll out Microsoft Dynamics CRM for user adoption, you want to recommend one single way to do something. Now, the tech-savvy users, they're going to go off and they're going to find the other ways, and they're going to be doing things differently. But for the broader group, you want to make sure that you're recommending one way. And in the testing, that's a great way to lay out, this is how we're going to do this. So are people going to use the Outlook client, or are they going to use the web client? Are they going to go to the account and add an opportunity, or are they going to go to the opportunities and add an opportunity from there? Are they going to go to the contact and add them to the marketing list, or are they going to search for the contact and add to the marketing list? So just defining those clicks and those one ways of how we're going to recommend navigating the system is huge. Additionally, you want to have a two-pronged focus for your testing. So you want your core team to focus around testing the processes and the integrations. That's the core project team who's involved with the design. But you also want your end users and your subject matter experts, kind of those power users that you're planning to have do the user acceptance testing. You want them to focus on end user experience. And this is another time where you just want to sit down and watch how they are using the system during the testing process. Have somebody, if you're working with a consultant, have them sit down and watch the end users while they're testing so that they can guide them on the clicks, on the best practices for accomplishing something. This is a way that you can refine your documentation if you're planning on doing some end-user documentation, so that you can see, well, the users are tending to go here, going to the wrong place, or they're forgetting that they have a dashboard, or whatever the situation may be. You can refine your training and your documentation at that time. If possible, select testers that are more tech-savvy. I know you might think, well, let's test the system on people who are not tech-savvy, and then we'll find out how difficult it's going to be to roll out. But really, that also impacts, again, the reputation of the system. So those non-tech-savvy users, they're for sure going to be frustrated. You're still you're still modifying the system, you're still making changes, they may not understand that, and so they are going to go back to their desks. They are going to spread negativity about the system if they are frustrated. So even if you're doing enhancements and having people test them, you may want to choose those power users to do that. So that's all I'm going to say about testing. I do want to briefly talk about rollout. I know a lot of you are already rolled out, but some of these things can still apply to enhancements and things like that that you're doing with the system. So user adoption definitely is impacted as you roll out. You oftentimes when you're rolling out, you're focused on the functionality of the system, you're focused on the Microsoft Dynamics CRM product, and it's very easy not to focus on the communication to the end users, how we're going to support the system, and how we're going to proactively reach out to people who possibly are going to struggle. So this is a great time to focus on those things if you have the luxury to do that. So the first one is communication to the end users. If you can designate someone whose responsibility it is to do this, communicate out possibly a weekly email leading up to the go live. And this is kind of a sales term, always be selling, but this is a great time to always be selling to the users the benefits that they're going to get from this new system, where they are now, and where we're going to be. If this can come from the executive sponsor, if this can be part of the executive or the manager's communication, that's all the better. Also designating someone to be thinking about support. So we had one organization that set up a help desk for their end users on the day of the go live. On the day of go live, they actually had instructions on everybody's desk, killing some trees, but they had a paper on their desk saying, if you want to email us, if you want to call us, if you want to chat with us, these are the places that you can get a hold of us. Here's how you log on. Here's where you go if you need help. So those are great things to have, making sure that they have multiple paths of communication. And also communication, again, on the technical side as well as the business side. You want to have a contingency plan for people who you know are going to struggle with user adoption. Maybe they're not technically savvy, maybe they've been kind of naysayers about this. And make sure that you have a communication for the plan for those people. Make sure that you can reach out to them, make sure they get logged on. If they didn't retain things from the training, that they have somebody to ask questions from. Those end users are probably going to be easily frustrated, and a little bit of negativity can really impact the sentiment in your organization. So we did have one organization that I'm thinking of where they had some sales people who were just highly experienced and had a huge industry knowledge. So when I talked early about getting that executive buy-in, having the executive say, this is the direction we're going, and do you want to be part of this or not, kind of strongly worded thing, your organization may be in a situation where some of the end users have a lot of clout. They make a lot of money for the organization. They have a lot of in-depth industry knowledge. Losing those users could be detrimental to the organization. In that case, sometimes we just need to face that. Possibly this ship has sailed in terms of them using the system extensively and putting in some support for them that allows them to stay involved with CRM. So we had one organization where they designated their sales assistant to really support those salespeople. She was just a champion for the system and knew the system inside and out, could help do data entry, even to the point where sometimes a salesperson would be on the road. They would call them from the car and say, please update this opportunity with such and such that happened at the meeting. And that person was actually physically interacting with the system on behalf of the salesperson. And sometimes that's where your organization needs to go, rather than constantly fighting with people who are actually really high value to the organization. Might be able to pay someone $8 or $10 an hour to solve that problem. So those are things to think about with the rollout and working with end user adoption on that. One of the most obvious things that people gravitate towards with user adoption is training. So let's talk about training. The thing to keep in mind when you're talking about training is that training is 70% about business process and 30% about clicks. So a lot of people head into CRM training or technology training with this mindset of, we're going to show them how to use the application, and they will understand how to apply this to their jobs. And so we want to actually focus more on how they're going to do their jobs and have training focused more on coming from business managers and business leaders than it is from the technical team. But let's talk about the different types of training that you can do and the effectiveness of those. So the first one on here is in-person training, and I can't stress it enough to just invest in in-person training. Instructor-led training is the most effective training that you can have. So if you can do instructor-led training and you have that luxury, I would do it. I would petition for the investment in that in-person training. Kind of the second best is the web-based training. So you might need to do some web conference and have remote users who are attending that. You can definitely do that. You do need to think about more reinforcements when you do a web-based training, more documentation, possibly some videos to reinforce what has been done. I don't recommend videoing the actual live training or the web-based training. That is not very effective in terms of watching it from an e-learning perspective. You might want to invest in actually having someone internal or having your partner develop some 5 or 10 minute videos that go over the material. You can go over it much more quickly in a video than you can in a live training. So, if they were to do 10 10-minute videos, 5 10-minute videos kind of going over some of the core content, that is great reinforcement and also good for onboarding. Try to schedule, so here's some do's and don'ts for training. Try to schedule training as close to go live as possible. I know that's kind of obvious, but if you can schedule it after go live, so if you're a small enough organization where you can go live over a weekend and come in on Monday and get training and then go back to your desk and actually work in the new system, that's ideal. As quickly as possible, getting people working in the new system after training is going to enhance retention and enhance user adoption. If you don't have the luxury of getting them, let's say that you've got a large team and you've got to get them trained right up until go live, maybe you are scheduling training out 2 weeks before that. Have a sandbox system that they can get in and actually be creative and have assignments for them that they can get into the sandbox system. And if you do these 3 things, maybe you'll get an award or a reward for getting in and playing with the system. You can also open a training lab and have designated times where people can come in and get coaching, or require them to come in and do some reinforcement of playing with the system so that they can get hands-on experience before go live. Some don'ts for training: don't insert a lot of technical jargon into the training. Make sure that you're using the business terms that people are using. Always have those business representatives in the training to do an introduction. If you're having a technical person do the training, they should be there the whole time chiming in on the training, saying this is how it's going to impact your job. Don't have trainings that are centered around a topic, but have them train around their role so that they can get that business perspective in the training. Don't have training days that last longer than 6 hours. People can't retain that much information. And best practices is to have one trainer per 15 people. So having huge classes is going to diminish the effectiveness of the training as well. So here's a sample training for 40 people, a mix of things that you might have. You might have 8 training videos that just cover some of the processes. You might run 4 instructor-led sessions for 10 people each. You might have a giveaway at each of those sessions to kind of create that excitement or reward people for participating. Of course, you want some sort of cheat sheet documentation. If you don't have a cheat sheet or something, just a single page, whatever it is, even if no one's going to read it, people don't feel like they have that security blanket when they leave the room. So even if your cheat sheet is kind of fluffy, just get something in their hand that they can take, maybe a list of other resources that they have. And then we're going to talk next about reinforcement. So you do want to set up some reinforcements of what they learn, and we'll talk about some different things like that. If you have the luxury of your processes matching most of the out-of-the-box processes, so if you're implementing just a straight sales implementation, there's so many resources that you can use for that. You can use the Resource Center. There's a plethora of videos online. There's blogs that give how-tos and instructionals. So if you're doing some of the out-of-the-box processes of sales, marketing, customer service, you use and leverage those resources, remembering that there's millions of users out there using Microsoft Dynamics CRM, and share that with your end users as well so that they know that they're not alone in this. There's millions of people out there, and there's tons of resources. So before we get into reinforcement, I want to talk a little bit about measurement, because after you go live with a system and you want to measure the user adoption, most organizations are measuring this based on sentiment. So usually you're hearing, it might be, if you have a small team, maybe 1 person or 2 people who are kind of negative Nellies, and they're infecting the rest of the group with a negative sentiment. You might also be on a larger team that the sentiment is being driven by other things like, technical difficulties that people are having, or maybe it's process realignment that may be causing that. The processes that they're doing are not aligned well with the system. So one of the overarching things with measurement is just to get some real data on how people are using the system. So you can definitely do some dashboards that you can create a CRM user adoption dashboard that sort of looks at how many records are being created and by who, whether it's accounts, leads, contacts, opportunities, phone calls, activities, whatever it is that you are doing in your CRM. You can create that user adoption dashboard that shows, who is actually creating things. There are system usage reports that you can create. There's currently none out of the box that come, but you can create custom reports that show people's logins and system access, especially if you're on-premise. You can get that information from the log files. So you can do those types of technical reports that show whether people are using the system or not. The main thing that you want to drive is from that business manager level, basically saying if it's not in CRM, it doesn't exist. So we want all spreadsheets that you were previously emailing me, those are, I won't accept those. I need to see your forecast in CRM. I need to see your activities in CRM. There's going to be no reporting that's done outside of CRM. So one organization we had worked with, they took that stance. They said, it's not in CRM, it doesn't exist, I'm not accepting anything from you. And they had some reports that were showing people logging in and how they were accessing the system. And had one gentleman that called his manager and said, I can't use this system, it's terrible, it is awful, I've tried to use it and I don't like it and I won't use it. And the manager looked at that report and found that the user had only logged in once, and it was several weeks ago, just after the training. So the user was clearly lying, and the manager was able to turn him back and be like, I can see right here that you're not even using the system. So make sure that those reports are in those managers' tool set when you go live, so that they have the tools they need to deal with their own teams. So let's talk about reinforcement. Reinforcement is the training wheels. Everybody needs training wheels. Very few people learn how to ride a bike without training wheels. So don't feel like reinforcement is just for organizations that have a lack of user adoption. Although reinforcement sessions can rescue an organization that maybe had a bumpy go live. So you can get that turned around by doing some targeted reinforcement sessions. Again, reinforcement should be seen as just building that depth and breadth of knowledge in your organization. So perhaps you had executives that never got on board and actually got hands-on using the system. Reinforcement sessions could be rolled out to those executives to get them working with the system. That's kind of your breadth. And to build in depth is taking those people who are champions and technically savvy and building in more understanding of the system that they have. So different types of reinforcement. You've got just that reinforcement from the training, so you're reiterating what people learned in the training or going through the same processes again. If you can add these into some of your existing meetings, that's great. So if you have a sales meeting every week or a team meeting, that you can maybe use 15 minutes of that to address some of the CRM things that need to be reinforced. That is great. You could also just plan on sort of an open-ended weekly training to reinforce things, maybe out 6 weeks after the training. There's a once-a-week half-hour meeting or an hour-long in-person meeting, depending on your organization, to just go through CRM again. Those things are great. As if you've already rolled out CRM and you're sort of just in the enhancement sort of life cycle, you can definitely do brown bag lunches to offer some tips and tricks. You can provide quick reference guides or how-to flashcards and things like that. You can conduct little games around CRM where there's more of a reward system, or you can just continue to build excitement about the use of CRM by rolling out new enhancements and new tips and tricks. So at this time, I want to do that last poll, Adam, and actually kind of find out of the different things that we talked about, whether it be planning or executive or management buy-in, process design, end user experience. What are the areas that you find are a struggle most for your organization? Maybe you could fill out that poll quick, and Adam can chime in with kind of the results that are coming in.
Sure. Seems like the majority of people have answered training and reinforcement.
Okay.
With a second from end user experience.
Okay. That's great. So hopefully this reinforcement area gives you some ideas of things to do with your organization. Let's talk a little bit then about rescuing. So rescuing would be you have that negative sentiment. You might even be in a situation where CRM is on the chopping block. And if something doesn't change, executives are thinking we need to change software and we need to do something different. How can you reset the situation? Because you and I both know that technology is never the problem. There may be slight differences in functionality between software technology, but those aren't typically showstoppers. Usually there is another reason why user adoption isn't happening. When we've worked with organizations in that situation, these are the two main areas, technical pain and process pain. So technical pain is something that you want to address first. And I just want to encourage all of you, if you're in the situation where you have a negative sentiment around technical issues, there is a reason why they are having technical issues. CRM does work. It can hum along beautifully, and many organizations are experiencing a smooth and daily use of CRM. So there are reasons why users may not be able to connect to the system, or their desktops are possibly not cooperating with the system. Maybe they're experiencing poor performance with the database. Those types of things can be resolved, so I just want to instill some hope in you that you can tackle those things one at a time and get them resolved and move beyond any technical pain that you may have. But I recommend doing that first, because you can sit around all day and talk about we need to be doing this or that, but ultimately if users can't get into the system, or if it's slow for them, if they're connecting via VPN and it's slow or something like that, you're not going to get beyond that. So let's tackle that and resolve that first. Process pain as well is a big area. So, you know, sometimes the business changes while you're implementing CRM. Sometimes users change. So you have a turnover in the design team. You have a turnover in the end users in your organization. Or sometimes you just miss the mark. So that's why you got Microsoft Dynamics CRM, because it's an agile platform that you can change. So you're going to want to do that sort of gap analysis of here's how the system is designed to work, and this is how people need it to work, and what adjustments do we need to make and get that into an enhancement development cycle. So you do want to address those things. You want to use that top-down and bottom-up approach of returning to the executives, making sure they're getting what they want out of the system, returning to the end users, watching them as they work. Identify some of the quick wins and shorten your development cycle so that you can get those out in front of the users and do a reset on. These are the things that, you know, we encountered that we realized were a problem, and this is what we've done to fix those issues. This is another area where if you don't have executive buy-in, now is the time to reset that and go back to the executives and say, Gretchen Opferque from Power Objects said, we really need your participation in this. We really need you to reach out to the company, make a broad statement to the organization that we do know there's issues, we are going to resolve those issues, this is the direction we're going, and get on board. So plan out their involvement in rolling out enhancements or rolling out this message. Also, if you're not in peril, or if you are, either way, it's a good idea to create those pathways of communication. So do users have a place where they can go to suggest features, to complain, to put in a ticket, whether it be with your help desk or whether it be a spreadsheet or something, one organization that we worked with, and I've recommended this to several organizations, is they created an entity in CRM called Ask Joe or Ask, Bob. And you could actually go to that entity and you could actually submit a ticket, and it could be a suggestion, a question, feedback on the system, things that aren't working. And that way they could actually see whether their question was being addressed. So it would be addressed in that area, and then a workflow would send them a notification saying, this is the solution, or this is the answer to your question. And that also then became kind of a searchable knowledge base that people could go and say, has anybody mentioned this before or made this suggestion before? And of course it became a list of enhancement requests that people had made. And also, just if you're the one responsible for that training and reinforcement, a list like that provides you really good fodder for what do we need to address with people. People aren't understanding this part of the process, or they're not understanding this aspect of the technology. So I definitely recommend you set up that pathway of communication back, even though you may be hesitant to do that because you don't want to hear what people have to say sometimes. But that is actually the entire agenda that I plan to go through. So now I do want to open it up for questions. I don't know if people have been submitting questions, Adam, or if...
yeah, Gretchen, we've actually got one question that came in under the Q&A tab. It says, hi, why did Gretchen say specifically, quote, especially if it's on premise,
yes.
parentheses, reference to system usage reports?
The system usage, because with CRM Online, we don't have, and you as an user don't have access to the database. So some of that usage information is actually stored in the database, and some of it is stored in logs that are outside of the database. So if you're on premise, you will have some of those logs on your server. Now, I'm a business analyst, not a technical person, so please forgive me if I'm not describing it correctly, but there are some things with the Active Directory and the IIS where you can actually look at people's logins on premise, but you don't have access to those online. So hopefully that is a good answer to the question. I think there's plenty of other things that you can do from the user interface, though, to check and see who is using the system. I think the things that may require more of a custom report, which you can do with CRM Online, is who is not using the system. And so you would need to, of course, take all users, take a look at how they're using the system, and then deduce who's not using the system. And that may require more of a custom report to get a nicely formatted view of that. Yep, somebody else said SSRS reports are not supported in CRM Online, only Fetch XML. There are some limitations to that, so that is true. So one quick and dirty tip that I have made for people is if you want to do a negative report, you can actually use marketing lists to do that. So if you want to query people who are not using the system, you might be able to do that by saying, show me all accounts, and then remove accounts that have activity on them, and then what's remaining is accounts that don't have activity, and then you can kind of look at, who owns those accounts and get an idea there. So, quick tip there. So I do have another comment here. We are a CRM partner, and we run into adoption problems frequently. Any tips specifically for partners? We can obviously do some training, but we are not trainers per se. What is the best approach to adoption in the sales process? If you're a CRM partner and are you thinking, I guess I'm wondering, are you talking about your own individual system? Or are you talking about when you're implementing with customers? I guess I can address both of them. And actually, maybe you could get back to me on that question. Just let me know if you're asking about the internal system or working with customers. The next question, are there any recommended reports which help gauge system usage? And I don't know of any out-of-the-box reports that do just system usage. That would be a great enhancement to recommend to Microsoft, and you can do that at connect.microsoft.com to put in some requests for enhancements. And Glenn replied back, implementing with customers. So one of my, I guess, big thrusts, because I've been working with implementing with customers, how do you help customers with user adoption or promote user adoption? And one of my big reasons for wanting to do this presentation is a lot of times as a partner you can make these recommendations, but it's really the customer who has to execute on them. So as partners, we're only influencers in this arena. I have pushed and pushed and pushed organizations to go with in-person training, and they've decided to go with online training. And then after the whole thing was rolled out, they come back to me and say, I wish you would have pushed us harder to do in-person training, because in hindsight we wish we would have done in-person training. And so for me, I'm just like, oh, I guess I could have, knocked down their door or something and just really, really emphasize the necessity for in-person training. So just taking that consultative approach and pushing organizations to do some of the things that we recommended in this training. I think that would be my overall answer to the question. So let's see here.
It seems that we have actually a question that was meant to be placed in the Q&A tab, but actually got sent to me. It says,
okay.
Thoughts on gamification and driving adoption with integration records can be created by the system instead of the actual user, which can skew adoption metrics if you are focused on the numbers of records.
Yep. Yeah, so that's where you may have to get creative about how you're measuring that user adoption. It might end up being more of a survey to the managers to gauge what they're seeing in the system from users. One of the common things that we've done is sort of auditing specific things in the system, so auditing the changing of different fields. There's the out-of-the-box audit, but that audit isn't very reportable, so you can't go to advanced find and say, show me all the people who changed this sales stage or changed this status. But you could do some audits using workflow to sort of write either to a custom activity. In 2011, you can do those custom activities that says they changed the status, or maybe you just want to write to the closed activities in the system, create a closed task or something that says they changed this. Or you can do a custom entity that's kind of your own audit. Maybe it's called the user adoption audit, just taking some different triggers in the system and auditing who's doing those activities. The benefit of doing a custom entity is that you can use security then to hide that entity from the end users, so they don't really know that you're auditing different things that are throughout the system. So hopefully that helps. The gamification of user adoption was also part of that question, and there's just a whole plethora of things that you can do with that. But taking some of those triggers or some of those benchmarks and providing rewards for those, publicly recognizing people at group meetings, showing a dashboard of user adoption and recognizing, for example, the top 5 people who are using the system, or most improved or giving awards for attending certain types of trainings or helping somebody else. And then especially if you're going live, it's a good opportunity to set out some different things that people want to achieve. So my first number of records of my first, getting my entire pipeline into CRM and submitting that to my sales manager, for example, the first time, I get an Amazon gift card or something of that nature, to just kind of promote people taking that first step and getting into the system. So hopefully those ideas are helpful. I think if you were to sit down and just brainstorm, I'm a big fan of brainstorming. Come up with some crazy ideas, and then from that you will have some ideas that are realistic, hopefully. So I had one question here. Know of any special creative uses for Microsoft SharePoint tools in CRM implementation? That one I'm struggling to think of what you would do there. So Chip, if you have any ideas, maybe you could throw them out there for the group in the chat area. Will this webinar be available as a recording? And Adam, I think it will be available. So
it will. That is correct. Yep. Should be available either later today or tomorrow.
So I think that's the last question on my board, unless there's anything else. So I just wanted to leave the group. I know that we've got a few dwindling folks here, but the last kind of motivational thing is Microsoft Dynamics is a CRM that's a foundation for success, and you build on it. So I just want to encourage you all to go out there and achieve that success. And here's my contact information. I'd love it if people would connect with me on Twitter. If you're doing CRM, I'd love to hear what you're doing. So, and I'll also be at the CRM UG Summit next week. So if anybody is planning to be there, I'll see you there.
Great, excellent. Gretchen, thank you so much. And once again, everyone, thanks for attending. And as I said earlier, the session is being recorded, and it will be available on demand either later today or tomorrow in the live events section of msdynamicsworld.com. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.